Welcome back after that short break. We continue on Economy Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman. We have tapped in on the BRICS summit before we went on a break. But before we continue on a G20 summit, Mr. Daniel Steinman, I would just like to or rather for you to just give us a short or brief opinion on if Namibia does decide to be part of the BRICS summit, how will this contribute to the economy of Namibia?
Elsewhere, there are a few basic facts that you need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
First is that we will never be formally part of BRICS.
Yeah.
If I say never, I'm talking about 10, 15 or 20 years. We are simply too small.
Yeah.
Remember, our entire economy is about 3% of the South African economy, which is the biggest economy in Africa, which is the smallest economy in the BRICS group. Do you see that perspective?
Yeah.
So we are tiny. But we do not need to be a member of BRICS because we are tied so closely to South Africa. We are by default a member of BRICS via South Africa. And if you talk about the you wouldn't have noticed over the last 5, 6, maybe 7 years, from about 2015 onwards, as you hear more and more the sound, whether it is in Namibia or South Africa or Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Angola, you hear more and more people talking about the regional economy. So eventually, the first step will be the SACU economy, which is already integrated to a very large extent because it uses the same currency. And that, long before we will be successful in integrating the African market, the economic force of SACU, with the muscle of South Africa behind it, will basically take over, or is in the process of taking over, the economies of Southern Africa. So I suspect, it's my opinion, that long before we get a formal grouping amongst those countries that I've mentioned, we will have a de facto unified economy. And this is not an overnight process. I'm not trying to tell you it'll be like this in 2024 or 2025. This is a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year process. But this is the way that it is, the direction in which it is developing. And there's nothing that you can do to basically stop it. And if you look at the G20, you must remember the G20 includes all the big economies in Europe and North America and then in East Asia. But there's not a single African economy in the G20, which again puts us, I don't want to say puts us in our place, puts us our size in perspective. Now you can imagine that if South Africa does not qualify for the G20 and we with our 3% and Botswana with their 3% of the SA economy together 6%, the point is that in the very long run, if we take a 50-year window, we will need different structures. Otherwise, we're just going to remain stuck in poverty, and Africa will be exploited by all the other sovereigns in the world. But Africa will not come to its own right. And I see the first germs of that movement. I hear it in the rhetoric of local politicians, but also of local economists and people responsible for economic planning, is that they realize, fragmented as we are, 52 countries, none of us is very strong. But if we can realize the African Union dream, say in 50 years, then it will be a very strong entity. But don't make the mistake of thinking that America and Europe and China are going to step back for 50 years.
Of course not.
They are not. You see, so it's a constant battle. And we have to be realistic about the fact that it's a long-term battle. We're not quickly going to get rich. Some of us are, but I think that's more part of our temperament than, to get rich quickly at the cost of your neighbor. But that's not what I want to discuss. So let's look at the G20. Remember, in the beginning I said, what you hear at these summits is all the same. Yeah. And they throw around these big concepts and these fanciful ideas, wonderful ideas. We have to reduce poverty and. But if you actually look at the indices, you see that poverty is just growing and growing and growing. And remember when I spoke about fertility, I said the economic aspect of fertility is very important. And it's completely irresponsible. I want to say it's criminal of a leader to tell young people they have to have as many children as they can because we need more young people. You can only say that if you're not responsible to raise that child.
Yeah.
But if you are the mother and the father, the picture looks a bit different, So it is really criminal to encourage people, because the basic economic fact is that if your fertility rate is bigger or higher than your GDP growth rate, we're all getting poorer slowly, little bit by little bit every year.
Yeah.
So you have to bring the two into balance. But that is a fairly sticky political issue.
Wow. I definitely cannot stop you from having this conversation, but unfortunately, we'll quickly have to go for a short break. But when we come back, we will talk more on the G20 summit, but also touch on the 1.7 billion people that live in a daily poverty.